Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your reading lesson, Oliver Twist. Today, in our lesson, we're going to cover pages 52 to 56. Our learning objective for today is explaining the story elements employed in the novel. We're going to focus on the conflict. Was it internal or external? We're going to focus on the character traits of some characters, theme, and plot. We're going to focus on rising action, which will lead us to the climax. Before we start our lesson, I want to take you over, or I want to show you the lesson steps. The lesson steps are: first, introduction. You are going to reflect on a picture to recap previous events. Second, the core. I'm going to read the required pages and I'm going to ask you to answer some questions. Also in the core, there are some Colorful Minds activities that posted in Google Classroom. They are under the topic Oliver Twist, March 22nd, 2020. Finally, the plenary is a check for understanding, and you are going to use Mastery Connect. Please check your classroom ID. So before we start, I want to show you this picture, and I want you to recap what happened that night. Okay, just have a look at the picture and answer the questions that will pop after. Brilliant. Now we are gonna go and read the required pages. The chapter that we're gonna cover today is Mr. Giles Catches a Thief. Mr. Giles Catches a Thief. So I'll start reading, and I want your full attention. The noise of their pursuit grew louder as Sikes rested the body of the wounded boy on a piece of dry ground. The men were already climbing the gate of the field in which he stood, and a couple of dogs were just in front of them. "It's all over, Bill!" cried Toby. "Leave the boy and run!" With this parting advice, Mr. Crackit turned and ran at full speed. Sikes took one look around, threw his coat over Oliver, and running along the fence for some distance. He was over it in one jump, and was gone. The three pursuers pulled back their dogs and stopped to consult with each other. Now, answer the questions that follow. "I agree with you, Mr. Giles," said a shorter man, called Mr. Brittles, who was very pale and frightened. In fact, all three men were afraid, although they were ashamed to admit it at first. Mr. Giles was head servant to the old lady of the house where the robbery had been attempted. Brittles was a lad of all work, who, having entered her service as a mere child, was treated as a young boy still, although he was now past 30. The third man was a travelling tinker, who had joined in the chase with his two dogs. Encouraging each other with the conversation, and keeping very close together, the three men returned home at a good pace. The air grew colder as the new day approached, and the mist rolled along the ground like a thick cloud of smoke. Oliver still lay motionless and unconscious in the place where Sikes had left him. Morning arrived fast. The rain came down thick and hard, but Oliver didn't feel it as it beat against him, for he still lay stretched out on his bed of clay. Now, answer the question that follows. Finally, the boy woke up, crying out in pain. His left arm hung heavy and useless at his side. He was so weak that he could hardly sit up. But he managed at last to stand and then walk unsteadily. Although he had no idea where he was going, he continued on until he reached a road, and looking around him, he saw a house at no great distance, towards which he directed his steps in the hope of getting assistance. He walked across the grass, climbed the steps, knocked faintly at the door, and then, his whole strength failing him, he sank down on the doorstep. It happened about this time that Mr. Giles, Brittles, and the Tingers were having tea in the kitchen. Mr. Giles was giving his hearers, including the cook and housemaid, a detailed account of the robbery, to which they listened with breathless interest. "It was about 2:30," said Mr. Giles, "when I woke up and thought I heard a noise." Now answer the question that follows. At this point of the story, the cook turned pale and asked the housemaid to shut the door. The housemaid asked Brittles, and Brittles asked the tinker, who pretended not to hear. "I heard a noise," continued Mr. Giles. "At first I said to myself, 'This is only your imagination, Mr. Giles,' and I was preparing to fall asleep again, when I heard the noise distinctly once again." "Good Lord!" cried the cook and housemaid at the same time, moving their chairs closer together. "I heard it now, quite distinctly," Mr. Giles continued. "Somebody, I said to myself, is forcing a door or a window. What's to be done? I'll call up the poor lad, Brittles, and save him from being murdered in his bed, or having his throat cut." Here all eyes were turned on Brittles, who stared at the speaker with his mouth wide open, and his face a perfect expression of horror. "I threw off the bedclothes," said Giles, "got softly out of bed, seized a loaded pistol, and walked on the tips of my toes to his room. 'Brittles,' I said, when I had woken him, 'don't be frightened. Don't be frightened.'" "So you did," confirmed Brittles in a low voice. "Was he frightened?" asked the cook. "Not a bit of it," replied Mr. Giles. "He was as firm, nearly as firm as I was." "I would have died at once, I'm sure, if it had been me," observed the housemaid. "You're a woman," said Brittles. "Brittles is right," said Mr. Giles, nodding his head approvingly. "From a woman nothing else was to be expected. We, being men, felt our way downstairs in the dark." Mr. Giles had risen from his seat and taken 2 steps with his eyes shut, to accompany his description with action, when he jumped violently together with the rest of the company, and hurried back to his chair. The cook and housemaid screamed. Now I want you to answer the questions that follow. "It was a knock," said Mr. Giles. "Pretended to be perfectly calm. Opened the door, somebody. Nobody moved. It seems a strange sort of thing, a knock coming at such time in the morning," said Mr. Giles. "But the door must be opened. Do you hear? Somebody?" Mr. Giles, as he spoke, looked at Brittles, but that young man clearly considered himself to be nobody, and so he gave no reply. Mr. Giles looked appealingly at the tinker, but he had suddenly fallen asleep. The women were out of the question. "If Brittles would rather open the door in the presence of witness," said Mr. Giles, after a short silence, "I'm ready to be one." "So am I," said the tinker, waking up as suddenly as he had fallen asleep. Brittles agreed to open the door on these terms, and they made their way upstairs with the dog in front. The two women, who were afraid to stay below, followed behind them. On the advice of Mr. Giles, they all talked very loudly to warn anyone outside that they were strong in number. Mr. Giles also made them pull the dog's tails in the hall to make them growl aggressively. When these preparations had been made, Mr. Giles gave the word of command to open the door. Brittles obeyed, and the group, walking fearfully over each other's shoulders, saw no more terrifying object than poor little Oliver Twist, speechless and very, very tired, who raised his heavy eyes and silently begged for their pity. "A boy!" cried Mr. Giles. Mr. Giles bravely pushing the tinker into the background and dragging Oliver into the hall. Then he called out in a state of great excitement, "Here he is! Here's the one of the thieves, madam! Here's the thief, madam! Wounded, madam! I shot him, madam!" Now I want you to answer the questions. The two women servants ran upstairs with the news that Mr. Giles had captured a robber, and the tinker busied himself in trying to restore Oliver in case he should die before he could be hanged. In the middle of all of this noise there was heard a sweet female voice. "Giles," whispered the voice from the head of the stairs. "I'm here, miss," replied Mr. Giles. "Don't be frightened, miss. I'm not badly injured. He did struggle very hard, miss." "Quietly," replied the young lady. "You are frightening my aunt as much as the thieves did. Is the poor creature seriously hurt?" "He's badly wounded, miss," replied Giles. "He looks as if he's dying, miss," called out Brittles loudly. "Wouldn't you like to come and look at him, miss, in case he dies?" "Quietly," said the lady again. "Wait a minute or two while I speak to aunt." The speaker walked softly away, and soon returned and ordered that the wounded person was to be carried carefully upstairs to Mr. Giles' rooms, and that Brittles was to go at once to church to fetch a policeman and a doctor. "But won't you take one look at him first, miss?" asked Mr. Giles with much pride, as if Oliver were some rare bird he had shot down. "Not now, Giles," replied the young lady. "Poor fellow! Oh, treat him kindly, Giles, for my sake." The old servant looked up at the young lady as she turned away with a glance of proud and admiring, as if she were his own child. Then, bending over Oliver, he helped to carry him upstairs with the care and gentleness of a woman. So these are the pages that we have to cover for today. I've read them all in case you don't have your book. Now, after we finish this, I want to show you the picture. So here is where the servants found Oliver. Now you need to refer to your Google Classroom and do the Google Slides. Yellow group, you have to write 5 main events that will cover today's lesson. I want you also to explain the conflict embedded in them. The blue group, you have to compare and contrast Mr. Giles and Brittles' reaction to the knock at the door, how they were similar and how they were different. The green group will rewrite the events covered from Oliver's point of view. Start as following. "I woke up and felt that